The House of Mystery presents Inside Writing, the radio show where authors discuss their writing process in all genres.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery, and I'm Al Warren, and over in the ditch, we've got Mr. Michael Hawley.
Hello, how are you doing, Al?
I'm good. I'm making national news this week.
That's what I hear. You and Tucker.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson. So in honor of Tucker Carlson not liking that I turning people gay every day at a time.
Sad.
And all that stuff. I thought, well, geez, we've got a great guest today. An author of, his book is called Disasterama, and it's Adventures in the Queer Underground, 1977 to 1997. Mr. Alvin Orloff, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, what got you into actually deciding to write a book about this subject and in this era?
Well, two things. First off, I'm getting on in years, and my memory is not as sharp as it once was. I wanted to get it all down before I forgot. I've just turned 60, and it's the memories, they do fade. But mostly, I really wanted to capture what it was like to live through that era. There are a lot of books that kind of gloss over a lot of the terrors of the AIDS crisis in 1977 to 97. That's pretty much the unifying experience of people who lived through those years in the LGBTQ community or communities. And I thought it was important to have a kind of a ground's eye view of what it was like to live through that.
What do you think people get wrong most about that time period?
Well, I'm not sure that people are getting stuff wrong about it, as they just don't know about it. I mean, there's like a few history books, but I mean, who's really going to crack a giant history book about AIDS unless it's something that they already know something about? I wanted to reach out to the general public, like Mr. 24-year-old, and let them know what it was like. The precipitating incident that got me to start writing was someone who was 24 and just asked me, what was it like when everyone started dying? And, no one had ever asked me that before. People were not really talking about it 10 years ago when I started the book. Now I think there's a little more historical interest just because time has passed and it's a little less of a raw memory for people.
I like that you just turned 60 because so did I. And then so the interesting thing for me was that I graduated in 1980, but then I went to Michigan State University, and one of my fellow alums, Magic Johnson, when he acquired AIDS, I think that really got a large population more in tune to it. So I was curious about what you thought about that going on and how you living through all of that.
Gosh, there were just years and years and years when, I guess maybe from 1981 to, the time Rock Hudson and Magic Johnson, were kind of revealed as having AIDS, when it was something that was pretty much only of concern to the gay community, the public at large.
Right.
It was kind of something you didn't want to think about, and when you did, it was just you were angry and scared, and people kind of were not investigating what was really happening. And I think, but a few celebrities coming out as being HIV positive really made a huge difference.
And then that movie Philadelphia was that after that with Tom Hanks?
Yeah, I think, well, there's a bit in my book about how a lot of the early stuff about AIDS was kind of portraying gay men as these tragic heroes, the kind of noble tragic heroes. And that was not my experience. It's not that we weren't, heroic or tragic, but primarily we were kind of happy-go-lucky young people, and we were pretty determined to keep on being happy-go-lucky young people through the worst of it. I mean, people were on their deathbeds cracking jokes and just refusing to be victims, refusing to accept that as their identity.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was quite a time, and I guess it was also hard for Americans because of the Reagan era, and he wouldn't even say the word, and a lot of confusion with that whole time. Do you think that had a big influence on how the gay community was treated?
Oh, sure, absolutely sure. Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I would, overhear people. I mentioned this in the book. I was at the gym and I heard straight guys talking. Hey, did you hear the one about, what does gay stand for? Got AIDS yet? Ha 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 ha.
Right.
It was very much a time when that sort of mentality was prevailing.
It's certainly a huge difference now with the last pandemic with COVID, and it being that it affected everyone, didn't matter what their sexuality was. And it's pretty amazing how it's a different reaction by the same people that were doing that to gay people back in the 80s.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. It's quite a change.
Nowadays, what I thought but if you were conservative, it didn't affect you. That's what I was gathering at the first part of the, but that because it got so political.
Yeah. Yeah, which is it's complete stupidity, all of it.
Yeah.
Take that, Tucker. So when you wrote this book, you probably had an idea or a picture in your mind of what you wanted it to come out like and what you want it to get out in the book. Do you think you achieved that?
I do. I wanted it to be a fun read. I wanted it to be a fun romp, maybe. I wanted people to be able to laugh and kind of experience the humor of there was a lot of gallows humor, but also just a lot of regular young person hijinks that were going on during that time. And I wanted to convey that. And, I did interviews with about, 6, 7, 8 people who I didn't know intimately at the time, but who also lived through those years, just to kind of see if my experiences were fairly typical. And, they all gave me their feedback, and I sort of incorporated that into the book in a sly way by talking about, people were saying this, people were thinking that. And, once the book came out, I got a lot of response from a lot of people saying, oh yeah, that was the world I lived in.
So it's a very positive book then?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's positive.
Well, did you ever get any backlash with these, especially lately with such extreme, left and right now? There's such a divide, and people are very, let's say, vocal, or at least on social media.
Well, yeah, I haven't gotten any backlash because I don't think that anyone on the right knows my book exists. It's a very small publisher. It's a very small publisher put it out.
Well, it's too late now because you're talking to Al. So Al is
I've got followers like Tucker Carlson. He likes to be mean. So you never know. So at the end of the day, so someone picks up Disasterama and they read it. At the end of it, what is it you hope they take away?
That's a very good question. It's going to take me a fraction of a second to think of an answer. I'm
a pro.
I want them to know, like I said before, I want them to know what it was like to live through those terrible years. And it was different for different people. I mean, I was very young when the AIDS crisis was going on. When people in their 20s, some of us like me, were kind of maybe not the most serious people. Like I say, we were happy-go-lucky. We were having hijinks. We were, into doing our stupid bands and going out. And how do you do that? How do you square like wanting to be like sexually active and, dating and doing all sorts of crazy stuff when you're in the middle of a pandemic, a plague, something that's making that very, very hard. It's a collision. It's a collision of the exuberance of youth with the reality of mortality. And it's a tough mix.
How do you think that changed you? Like when you look back at it now, when you look back at those times and of course the new wave punk sort of thing was going on, but
yeah, exactly.
But at the very end of it, and after you've written about it now and you look back, do you notice some things that you would have done differently maybe?
Oh my gosh, I would have been so much more responsible. I think a lot of people will say that, maybe I shouldn't have done acid, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I would definitely not have been as devil may care. A lot of the book is about what do you do when you're in your 20s? And you're pretty sure that you're going to die before you hit 30. Because I spent most of my 20s thinking that I was not going to live to be middle-aged. So I didn't save, I didn't plan, I didn't do a lot of things that I probably would be better off now if I had done. But I didn't know that I was going to live. It was a big surprise. So I finally found out that I was HIV negative. It was like, what? So yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, it was just really, it could, you know, you could have had sex with one person and been test positive. It wasn't,
Right.
There's people I know that were, you know, in the bathhouse every day, and that they're still alive and never caught it. Right? It's just, it's just the way it goes. You know.
Well, the interesting thing though is what Alvin you said is that you fully expected that you weren't going to make it till 30.
Right.
And then probably the people that go into the bathhouse, maybe they had that same mentality. Why I'm asking that is because my original job was I was a military pilot, Navy pilot, and we are on the opposite side. We feel like we're immortal, and then we have that's the last thing that's going to happen to us. But I have a friend that is doing the same thing. Says he believes he's not going to live for another 5 years, even though he's younger than me. So he lives that way. So I was curious more about that part. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's two ideas that I held in my head at the exact same time. One is that I'm young, so therefore I'm immortal, because a lot of young people just can't even imagine death. And then the other thing is, of course, I'm going to die, so I don't need to plan and be responsible. So, I mean, it was, you know, the human mind is capable of amazing feats of irrationality, and that was one that I mastered at a young age. Was believing both of those things at the exact same time, that I was immortal and doomed.
You know, actually, I had much the same thought. Not so much because of HIV. I say, for me, I just thought that I wouldn't live till 30. It was sort of, I'm a very negative creature, and I still don't think I'm going to live 5 years. But from now, I've always had that feeling. So, but you know, that's not.
Well, I'm a centurion. I'm still immortal.
Well, yeah, you're going to be 100 years old and still doing stuff, you know.
That is correct.
Crazy, man. And when it first was coming to it, I was coming out in the 80s, kind of hanging out. I was lucky because I had an older guy that took me to the clubs in Vancouver, and one of the first clubs we went to, we looked, and it was huge, a couple hundred people in there, and he said, "Look at half this crowd here; they're HIV positive," and he sort of scared me at the beginning. So I was kind of a little bit on edge at the beginning. So, but I think that there was a lot of misinformation, just like there is now with COVID. There's a lot of things, you know, it's the gay disease, it's the gay cancer, and people had different ideas, and they didn't really know what it was. Did you have any particular long-term relationship that you were sort of in during that time?
No, I was pretty promiscuous. I did have a very best friend who I met when I was 17, and the Disasterama is also a tale of our friendship. It's about me and my friend Michael Collins, who later changed his name to the stage name Diet Popstitute. And he was just one of those amazing characters. Like, everybody who met him was beguiled. Even people who, you know, little old ladies, you know, children, cats, everybody who met him was sort of beguiled because he had this huge, larger than life personality. I'm kind of an introvert, and he was just like, everyone he met, he would immediately be like trying to figure out by asking them, you know, where are you from? What are you into? Why are you like that? And he would start like psychoanalyzing people and telling, you know, the problem with you is, or, you know, I love you because da-da-da-da-da. Right away. He just had this way of instantly connecting with people. And so I sort of like he was my best friend, and we just did everything together from the moment we met until he died in 1995. And he died of a long struggle with AIDS. And it really changed him way more than it changed me, because when he started out, he was a very angry young man. He was from a working class Irish Catholic mill town in Massachusetts. And he came to San Francisco to be punk rock and a poet. And he was just very, very aggro, as the kids would say. And as he got sick, he kind of reinvented himself as kind of a cheerleader for the queer community. He became very responsible. He became clean and sober. He was kind of an amazing, not a drag queen exactly, more of a club kid. I don't know if you know the terminology, but there were these kids who just went out to clubs every night dressed in the craziest outfits they could think of, and kind of lived to be these exotic creatures. And he sort of became like that, but also a cheerleader for the community. And wow, yeah, he just did a complete 180, while at the same time maintaining his kind of almost exuberant extroversion.
Yeah. How did the death of his death change you?
Well, gosh, I went into a depression, and I was I guess in my mid-30s, and again, I hadn't really planned for a future because I had thought that I was going to die too. And so suddenly in my mid-30s, I was hit with, oh, by the way, you're not going to die, and the person you'd planned to spend the rest of your life with is no longer here. So I was kind of a mess for a few years. It's not that I did anything like newsworthy in my messiness. I just didn't really know what to do with myself. And then I kind of had like a flash. Oh, by the way, you've always been a bookworm. You've always loved writing. So I started writing and, started churning out novels, and I got a job in a bookstore, and then I became a manager of a bookstore, and now I own a bookstore. And I just kind of immersed myself in the literary world, because I sort of needed a new place in which to be. I couldn't really be part of the world that he was very much part of the performance theatrical drag world. And that wasn't really me. I'd only ever been part of that because he was so into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, was there a particular thing that happened or event that made you start writing then?
A particular event? No, not really. It's something that I'd always been, having always been a bookworm, I'd always kept in the back of my mind that I could start writing. And, the years I spent with Michael, what had I been doing? Not writing. I'd been writing a little teeny bit for zines, these kind of self-published zine, tiny Xerox magazines that punk rockers used to make, or maybe they still do. So I would write zines, but most of the time in that period, I was working as a DJ, I was working as a stripper, I was busy being a club promoter for Michael's club, the Clubstitute. And so I was sort of like rediscovering something that I'd always had in me, the writing.
Yeah. I think Michael was a stripper too for a while.
Well, and
let's just say it didn't last very long, 1 week.
They got married to an Italian woman. I'm stuck now. Cement galoshes, the whole deal.
Yeah, it's just terrible. So, well, it's interesting, but I think that when you write stuff, even if it's not your own story, but this has a lot of you in it, right? So when you do that, over the years, and even myself and Michael writes, I know that you put a little bit of yourself into it in different places, and you share a lot of your feelings, things that are important to you, emotions and stuff like that. That takes a lot of courage. That's why I asked if there was some sort of thing that all of a sudden you're, well, I'm just going to do it. Because it takes a lot of courage to not only write it down, but then to also put it out there so everybody can read it. And these days, everybody and their dog has access to you, really. I mean, they can all say something or bad reviews or say mean things if they want. So that's kind of what I was getting at, if what gave you that courage to decide to publish something like this.
Well, having come out of the closet in the 1970s, I already kind of, in order to be able to do that back then, you had to have a very well-developed sense of, I don't care what people think of me. It's like you already, the public was overwhelmingly homophobic back in those days. And so, gay people would just kind of be like, oh, I don't care what they think of me in Peoria. I don't care what Anita Bryant thinks of me. And so I sort of still have that, I think. I still have the idea that it doesn't really matter what the outside world thinks of me, even though the outside world is now my world. I kind of stopped caring what people would think a long time ago.
But you said that you you admitted that you were an introvert.
Oh yeah.
So maybe so would that be a benefit to you then? You think, or like I'm kind of like in the middle, and I think the part of the my publishing is I always thought it was the extrovert side of me, but so I do see more and more introverts like enjoying that.
Oh gosh, there's a whole introvert pride movement now. Introverts are coming out of the closet and demanding that people respect their introversion. So yeah, it's a.
Where do they have the pride parade for introverts? Is it inside a house? It has to be in cover. Oh, it's terrible. I'm an awful person. Anyway, well, that's fantastic. So, where do you want to go with this writing and this? Where do you hope this book takes you? Like, are you hoping to open eyes of people that maybe didn't realize what it was like?
Yeah, definitely. And the people who I have talked to who have read it, who weren't part of that world, who didn't live through it, they definitely have told me that it was eye-opening for them, that they didn't really. I also wanted to build sympathy, not just open eyes, but also because you can open eyes in a way that doesn't build sympathy. I also wanted people to feel sorry for me. Understand what we've been through. I mean, every now and then, you hear people talking out, gay white men, they're so privileged, and most of my life living through, the homophobic reaction to AIDS and even the pre-AIDS homophobia really hasn't been like that, I think. And I think kids today don't even know what that was like. They just don't know yet.
Right. You're old when you say kids today. Well, it's true, but it goes fast, but you don't realize how fast it's going. I think for myself, I just think that all of a sudden you're out and about, and it's the '80s, and Madonna's running around on stage, and now all of a sudden Madonna's a grandma, and the kids are all using apps and not going to clubs, right? So it's changed a lot. Do you think it's changed for the better?
Oh, I think it's a matter of taste. I personally could live with not having a smartphone. I don't like looking at apps. I like reading the newspaper. I miss turning pages. I work in a bookstore. I like to, I'm kind of a 20th century creature. But surprisingly, a lot of young people are that way too. They love books. They like records. They like the ritual of, looking at the back cover of the record and pulling it out and putting it on the stereo. And, I think maybe it's just a question of taste, whether or not you like the olden days or the contemporary world better.
Yeah. Are you hoping for a better political world, or you're hoping that things like this will get better?
I don't know. I don't think I can predict the future very well. I never saw so much of what's happened coming. I wouldn't even venture to guess.
And then the twist with the COVID comes.
Right. No idea that Trump was going to happen. No idea about COVID, and I should have thought about COVID, right? Because, I knew that there were disease, I knew that plagues and pandemics were real. But I think it's partially how we're raised is, the history books that I grew up with. There'd be a big chapter on World War I, but there was like one sentence on the influenza epidemic that killed twice as many people. It's just, for some reason, our history doesn't focus on that as much as it might.
Are there any particular people that you think were kind of heroes during the era that you wrote about?
Oh my gosh, so many. I mean, yes. I would say every nurse in every AIDS ward and every emergency room who I came in contact with was a total hero. They went so far out of their way to be compassionate and there for everybody. I almost get teary just thinking about how great they were. And then, of course, the political people in ACT UP and Queer Nation who were, putting themselves out on the streets. I did a little bit of that. I went to protests, but there were people who actually endured meetings to set up the protests. And those meetings for me were much harder to deal with than I'd rather like face police wielding batons and charging me than to deal with like those meetings where everybody's kind of persnickety and like attacking each other for not saying the right thing. the planning meetings were really were more than I could handle. So the people who endured that in order to make ACT UP and Queer Nation happen have my undying gratitude.
What's your feeling on the usage of the word queer now? I know a lot of people, a generation behind me, don't like it, and I get a lot of emails. It's funny because when we get talked about and stuff like that, and they'll say queer and that, and I get emails and messages from people that are a little older than me, and they're like, I'm going to write the paper, I'm going to complain. And it's like, no, I would just hold off. It seems like a lot of people have kind of adopted that. What's your feelings?
Well, I feel like my generation adopted queer in order to be bratty and to set ourselves apart. So here we're reaping the benefits of that now, is that we annoyed people by being bratty and wanting to be queer instead of gay. But, the new generation's all coming along and annoying us by insisting that, by changing all their pronouns, and it's every generation has its thing that it wants to impose, and that's just the way it is, I guess.
Yeah. Did you ever look back at your writing? You've written quite a few books now. Did you ever look back at any of your writing and want to change it?
If I was able to, I would just never finish anything. I would constantly be revising, because it can always get better. That's just the nature of literature, is that it's never perfect. And I would love to be able to do that. But of course, that's not really how the world works. So you have to at some point just say, good enough, and then release it into the world.
That's funny when you say that, because for me, when I write, I consider myself more of a researcher. So when I write, if there's typos or peak, I always got P-E-A-K, P-I-Q-U-E, all these peaks. So my editor just rips me apart, and it doesn't bother me just because I'm not a writer. I'm more of a researcher. So it's interesting to hear that.
Yeah. And even just using a different word, saying, even a synonym, like just changing it so that the flow of the sentence works a little better, or it can be even the most minor little stylistic thing. Oh, I should have used a semicolon there. That would have been so much more elegant.
Oh, okay.
I think all sorts of stuff like that. And,
What was your favorite book that you've written?
Well, Disasterama is my most favorite.
Yeah. More complete. So you were in a teenage punk band.
Well, I was in a band called the Blow Dryers that my best friend from high school, Jennifer Blow Dryer, started.
Was that her real name?
No. If your family invented the blow dryer, that's why she's the... Yes, no, she named herself that because a lot of punk people were calling themselves, like, I'm Johnny Savage. They would come up with these names that were very kind of, I'm going to have to go ahead and say, pretentiously antisocial. And so she wanted to do something the opposite because she's kind of contrary. And we're still friends now. She lives in New York, and she's just written a book. And Jennifer Bloodrider, look it up. She's had this band, and I wrote lyrics for them. And that was really my first writing experience, was hearing her sing my lyrics to people. I wrote this song called Clone Me, because I was kind of a homely teen, so I thought I would never have a gay lover unless somebody cloned me. I would be my own lover. And then I had a song called Tired of Reading Up on Life, because I was an introvert and I wanted to just stay inside and not even read about the outside world. But then the band that really got me on stage was the Popstitutes, which was Michael Collins / Diet Popstitutes band, which was kind of this gigantic frothing chaos of anarchy with like 17 people on the stage and, writhing around in glitter and half nude. And he did the music mostly with tape loops, but then there was also a live accordion, live piano, live saxophone from this guy Brad, and that was kind of more almost like being in a performance art troupe rather than a band. But it was an experience. I didn't enjoy it, but did it.
What's your most memorable experience that you wrote about in this book?
Oh gosh, I guess getting AIDS, the test for HIV, and that day was just so harsh for me, because at the same time that I got my negative result, my best friend got his positive result, and it was just the universe, the floor. The only time in my life that I've actually felt that feeling, like the ground dropping beneath you and like you're just falling. That's the only time I've ever really felt that.
How is it with the reaction of some of the? I remember some of the religious nutwings, talking about, well, it's God's punishment on you, and you get what you deserve, and all that stuff. How are you with religion now?
Well, I wasn't raised religious, so it didn't really affect me at all. I didn't really think about, secular Jews. We didn't really worry about what the fundamentalist Christians thought about us. So what's next now after Disasterama, and you get this all out and running? And what do you got coming up next? I've got another novel that I can't think of a title for, about a very passive-aggressive barfly who just needles everyone. It's a comedy, who just needles everyone around him to the point where he gets thrown out of his apartment and has to find another place to live, and is constantly just like battling his own passive-aggressive desire to annoy people. So there's that, and
just use my name.
There you go. And Alan Tuck.
Yeah, Alan Tucker. Wow, great. Now, so you're not really. Do you do social media a lot? Do you like to have readers or fans kind of interact with you that way? Or?
Yeah, I get a lot of mail from people who read the book, and also because I am the proprietor of a bookstore, I'm behind the counter, and people can come up and tell me what they thought about the book. And a lot of people come up and tell me their story. Like you can almost see it in their eyes. They need to talk about it because they haven't talked about it. They've never told anyone their story. And I always say everyone should write a memoir. Sometimes maybe it doesn't need to be a full book. Maybe you just want to write, an article or, a short story, just something to get yourself out there. Because I can see it in people's eyes that they need to talk about it. And, I'm happy to listen too. I'm always happy to hear what people want.
So, Alvin, with that, and why, with Al and I, we like to write about serial killers. What does that mean about us?
I can only imagine.
Oh, it's all good stuff. Well, so how would you like people to get a hold of you? Let's talk about, do you have a website? Do you have...
Oh, yeah. I've got a website, alvinorloff.com, and there's a link there. You can send me an email. And I haven't gotten any hate mail yet, so we'll see. We'll see what this precipitates.
We're going to work on that, okay? And so your bookstore. So whereabouts do you have a bookstore? You want to give that a little?
Yeah, it's called Fabulosa Books. It's on Castro Street in San Francisco, in the heart of the neighborhood. It's a beautiful, beautiful street. We've got this gorgeous 1920s theater, the Castro Theater. It's a great store to work in because it's in the same spot as a historic LGBT bookstore from the 80s, a different light. And, we've just got so many great writers living in the neighborhood. It's kind of amazing.
Are you supporting a lot of gay writers, even if they're not in San Francisco? People that, they want to sell their book through you, you'll.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We try to have, everything we can. It's a small store.
Yeah, of course.
But we try to have a good array of things, not just local people. And there's an audience for it here in San Francisco. I mean, I know it's super tough if you live in like some little town in Texas. I mean, people come in, people visit San Francisco from all over the world, of course. And a lot of people come into town for the Pride celebrations in June. And people come in with these sad stories, like not even just like there's no gay bookstore in my state. It's like there's no bookstore in my town. People,
yeah.
Well, do you do book signings as well there?
Oh, yeah.
Local authors?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. You mean there are gay people in San Francisco? I've never heard that. That must be new. Oh, anyway. Well, of course, we're going to have everything up on our website so people can find you with one click and all that. How was COVID for you as far as writing? Does it affect you? Do you get, just the emotions? Like just all this insane stuff. You have Trump with the hair and you got all the, drinking bleach and COVID and you got all this stuff and tension going on. Does that get in your way writing?
Yeah, it does sort of. Just because, during the Trump presidency, I was addicted to the news. I just couldn't believe what was happening. So every day I was having to, focus, and then I would reading after you read the news, then you have to recover because it was everything that was happening was so crazy, which, that hasn't really gone away, I guess. I've always been a news hound, in terms of having to read the news and keep up with current affairs and all that. So that takes up a lot of time, that could have gone to writing. I'm a very slow writer. Oh my gosh, it takes me forever to write anything. Here I am 60, I think I've written 4 books. So that's what, maybe a decade a book, something like that. I'm not
what makes it so tough for you to write? Is it just tough to put the words down, get your emotions out, or?
It's not even the emotions. I think it's the tinkering. I like to tinker with language, and I like to hear the way a sentence sounds in my mind and the way it sounds when I read it aloud. And I also like rewriting. I rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And so, even after I've written a full draft, there's got to be, as I said before, there's like an infinite number of improvements that could be made. So I just have to keep going and, wait until I'm finally somehow or other can convince myself to put it out into the world.
So you need a dose of me where I just write it down and give it to the editor.
Wish I could get that. If you could bottle that.
Yeah.
That's right.
No, it's a tough thing to do, but there is a point where you got to just kind of call it quits and say, that's it. Done.
Yeah.
Otherwise you won't, it keeps on going. And then it's also, I find that there's a certain rhythm and feeling, or perhaps life to a book that you're writing, and there's a certain point where it changes. So if you leave it too long, it no longer feels the same as it did when you were writing at the beginning. The magic.
Yeah, because for one thing, it could does get boring for you to read the same thing over and over, and revise the same thing over and over. And also, it's sort of like cooking. Like if you're cooking and you keep cooking something, and you're like, oh, this soup could use a little more of this, a little more of that, a little more of the other thing. Oh, I need to do this. Eventually you end up wrecking the soup. There's no way.
Yeah. I do that a lot. So wreck soup, that is. That's anyway. Well, it's certainly been a pleasure. I've enjoyed having you on, and I hope that the book, it looks like it's been doing okay, and I hope it continues to do good for you, and get out there with your book signings and everything, and I hope it all goes well for you and the bookstore and everything. So we appreciate you being here. Now, the book we're talking about is Disasterama, and the guest is the author, Alvin Orloff. Thank you for being here.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Alan.
Nice speaking with you.
Tired of wasting time trying to decide what to watch on your streaming service? Go to our website and look for the Martino movie reviews.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.